Hello, and welcome to another episode of Constructing Success, which is a sales, lifestyle, and performance hack podcast. Today, I have an incredible guest that I'm very fortunate to have on the show. You may know him from Cairo TV or Fox News. You may have seen him covering the Mariners. You may have seen him flying around in Blue Angels. But today with me, I have Bill Wixey, who has started his career as a news anchor back in 1998. And he has worked his way from covering stories around the world as far as Sri Lanka, which he'll get into, and has won 2 Emmy Awards for journalism. So needless to say, I'm incredibly excited and humbled to have you on my show. Bill, welcome to Constructing Success. Constructing Success.
You're killing it. Thanks,
Thank
Derek.
you.
Appreciate it, bud.
So having you here as we go through these shows and with my guests, I want to uncover your history. We want to talk about the accolades. We want to talk about the great things that have happened. And then I want to work backwards. And I want to work backwards and figure out what it took to get where you are now, some of the obstacles that got in your way. And when those obstacles came, how did you continue to push forward? We talked about this briefly. We touched on it briefly. Not everybody has the tenacity to do what you've done, to overcome what you've overcome. And just from being around you, to carry yourself in such a cool, easygoing manner with an outlook on life that, at least from the outside, seems to be happy-go-lucky at nearly all times. So touching on those things, if you don't mind, can we start with what made you get into journalism? Like high school, you turn 18, maybe you're 16, maybe before. What makes you go that direction?
That's a great question. I think, so many kids, and I've raised 2 now, raising, like for me, it was one of those middle school aptitude tests where, like, do you remember when they used to say, what are you into? What are you interested in?
Yes.
And, and I remember I filled the thing out and it came back as radio DJ would be like one of the top things for me. And I remember like in like 8th grade, like thinking, yeah, that would be a really cool job, like to be a radio DJ, because I was, into music and into being a ham and, that sort of thing. Like that would be a pretty cool job. But in the end, like I was a huge sports nerd, and I just thought, I was a season ticket holder for everything in the Seattle area. Like my dad and I had season tickets to the Huskies, Seahawks, Mariners, which was a sentence you had to serve like in the 70s and 80s, Sonics, Sounders, whatever. Like we had, like I spent more time in the Kingdom than any kid should have been allowed. And like, I would see the reporters on the field, like they would walk through the tunnel where the players were, and they were really up close. And I thought to myself, like, that would be a cool job. Like if I had to go and do something every day, like that would be pretty cool to try to understand, how these players operate and, how teams operate and stuff like that. And that was my first inkling that was something I really wanted to do. And then all through high school, I kind of had that in mind, like that was something I wanted to be a part of. Like even when I was given an opportunity to do PA at the high school football games, like I jumped at it, something like that. So that was the first thing. And I never deviated too far from that. Like I always wanted to get into broadcasting.
You played sports as well, right?
Yeah, not as well as you would need to like go professional or whatever, but I did play some college baseball, and I knew I wasn't good enough to, make a career at it, but, being around it, like, seemed interesting to me. And what's become even more interesting to me is to understand how winning teams operate. Like, there's a huge difference between a team that's going out and competing and a team that goes out and wins. And I've been really lucky to be around some organizations that have been incredibly successful, and it always fascinates me to find out, like, what that magic elixir is, that gets, great performances out of people, and that winning culture that you cultivate in a locker room.
Have you gotten a chance to sit in on any of the formulas, potions, or elixirs that have helped change teams?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it, like Pete Carroll would be a good example, like buy-in, like buying in, like every time the players walk out of the locker room at the VMAC, at the training facility, or at the stadium, there's a sign that says "I'm in," and he's had that from day one, and the players hit that, like "I'm in," and that was the most important thing for Pete. And I don't know if you remember, but when Pete Carroll came to Seattle, there was it was a controversial hire. Like, nobody thought that this, yes, he had some success at USC, but when he comes to Seattle, like, are you going to get buy-in like that from NFL players? And people were like, there's no way that's going to work. You look at, his career in New York, and you think, well, maybe it'll work. But in Seattle, he had a lot of young players, a lot of guys that had chips on their shoulder, guys. And to this day, like, every guy on that roster in some way has a story to tell. Like, they've overcome something. There's been some adversity in their life that they've dealt with. And he looks for those kind of players that they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And so I feel like buy-in is the biggest thing. If you buy in to the greater good, the team comes together as a whole, and that way you get cohesiveness in the locker room, and that's huge. And I've seen that over and over and over in my time. In Green Bay covering the Packers, or in Arkansas covering the University of Arkansas Razorback basketball team, when they had great success in the 90s. I was right in the middle of that, and that was the quintessential aspect of all of those teams is buy-in.
Yeah, so buy-in, and I want to cover Arkansas and Green Bay, but when you're saying buy-in, that's a huge piece of it. But you also touched on players that have had some sort of adversity or some sort of chip on their shoulder, but they're still there. And I'm not a sports psychologist, and I'm just shooting from the hip here, but what I would equate that to is grit. And grit is what is going to make you show up no matter what happens. You keep fighting, you keep pushing. And when you get that buy-in from a team that every player has its own chip on its shoulder, every player has bought into the program, every player has grit, and now it's bigger than ourselves. We're a part of a team, and I'm going to put the guy on my right on my shoulder. I'm going to put the guy on my left on my shoulder, and I know that if I fall, they're going to pick me up. That, once again, I don't know, but that's where I think it comes from. And I hope that I'm not wrong here. This is just kind of connecting. I didn't plan on it going this direction. But do you recall, I know he's spoken to other sports teams, but I believe he spoke to the Seahawks before they won the Super Bowl. There is an author, and he focuses on stoicism, Ryan Holiday. Have you ever heard of him? Or does that ring a bell? Really. It's just the timing on this. I'm looking at the Moore Theater right here, and he's speaking there tonight. I'm going to see him. But I believe the Seahawks. Oh, really? Yeah, I believe the Seahawks had brought him in before that Super Bowl year. If I'm wrong, I apologize to the listeners, but I do believe that was part of the formula that helped him. And And actually, so going from there, and I want to keep this on your story, but you bringing up that eighth grade aptitude test, mine was, I believe that mine was something with radio, because I think it gave you a few options, but it said like, here's your number one, here's your number two, and
Right.
here's number three.
Exactly.
My number one was a stunt actor. Like that's just what it recommended. That's what it recommended for me. I didn't go that way, but I was like, okay, school's not really working out for me. Like I could just tell, I could
Me
tell,
neither.
yeah, I could tell at that time. I was like, okay, that was a little bit unusual. And you said, so you played in college a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Where
was a
did you play?
catcher. Yeah. I was a catcher, baseball player. I grew up playing hockey and baseball. I'd play hockey in the winter and then baseball in the summertime. And the hockey thing was, very challenging. And when I got to my sophomore year in high school, my second year of Bantam, I stopped playing hockey,
Hmm.
and then I started kind of focusing on baseball. And I I wasn't like supremely talented or anything, but I really worked at it. And I even my sophomore year in high school, because back then we only had 3 years of high school, sophomore, junior, senior, and I got cut from the baseball team. I didn't even make JV my sophomore year, and I worked and worked and worked. I spent so much time in the batting cages and just like really tried to figure out how I was gonna make that team, because it was a really good team. We finished third in state my senior year, and I was able to figure that one out. And I wasn't any sort of a high school baseball player. I mean, I was pretty much a bench sitter, but I was still able to go to college, like and do that only because you know because I wanted it, and my American Legion career was better
Hmm.
than my high school career for many reasons. But that was part of that. But it just came with reps. You just got to keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing
Yeah.
it.
So this is odd. This was not my intention. My intention is to keep the focus on you, but there's a correlation here. So your high school was 3 years because you went to Lake Washington, which you were a
Right.
kangaroo, and that
Kangaroos.
kangaroos, yeah,
Go Kangs.
yeah, and they were a bigger Kinko school. I think that's why they were
Yeah.
just 3 years. So
Yeah. Or 4A.
or
Whatever.
4A, right? So when you left that, when you were playing American Legion and having more success in that league or with that team, what do you think it was between high school? I have a little take on this, but between your high school coaching and your American Legion coaching, or whatever it was that made you more successful there.
I think it was getting out of that um idea that I didn't belong. Like these kids. So I played Woodinville Legion, and these were kids that like literally recruited me. Um, there were some great players that played there, and this was a team that was made up of Woodinville, Bothell, and then I was this weird, Lake Washington kid that came in there, and I feel like, and this was my experience like all through my baseball career, like being the outsider coming in, like I had a better opportunity to prove myself, but like also be a part of a whole that like didn't have some preconceived notion of who I was or what I was.
Hmm.
You know, like in high school, I was sort of pigeonholed into this one thing, and I always thought like I could do better than that.
Hmm.
And even though I had moments where I felt like I would shine, I never was able to overcome that in that construct. So like it was fun to go be a part of a team with people that I didn't know, as I didn't grow up with,
Hmm.
and we didn't have that history, and so that really worked out. And that's been my experience a lot of places. I mean, television, is a very, it's kind of a vagabond existence. You're going from one place to another. You're working with random people, and you got to work your way in and become a family in some ways. And I think that's helped that too. Try to foster that sort of relationship, that teamwork in that, because in the end, like, it doesn't matter where you came from or what you've done before. Like, if you can come in and contribute on this team, like, you're in,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. And so you graduate high school. Do you go straight to Washington State?
Well, so I went to a little college in Missouri called Central Methodist, and I got in. I got in. My grades were not great.
Mm-hmm.
I really hadn't figured out school yet. Like, I was a horrible high school student. I didn't I didn't enjoy school in general, like taking tests and that sort of thing. Like, it didn't resonate with me at all. I wasn't an idiot. I kind of knew that, but like school told me that I sort of was. But going there, and I really tried hard, and I knew I had some aptitude for it. And then like I went there and I flunked out. I didn't even get to play baseball when I went out there. I
Oh,
went there
really?
to play baseball. That was my whole goal. I was working out with the team, and then I flunked out. I never even got to play a game. Came home, total failure, partied for a year, and then got that out of my system. I went to Bellevue College, and I, through some stroke of luck, I applied to this. It's called interdisciplinary studies, and they offer it to this day. This was a pilot program at the time, and it's based on the Evergreen State College model.
Hmm.
And they basically, there were no tests. It was just a full course curriculum. So like I was getting 15 credits through three different disciplines where there was one central theme, and I took a couple of these courses, and not having the weight of like rote memorization and tests and those sorts of things, like, it changed my life,
Hmm.
absolutely changed my life. And I realized I wasn't an idiot, and that it wasn't me that was the problem. It was the way that I was learning. I had to learn how to learn, if that makes any sense. And once I learned how I learn, the rest of school was easy.
Hmm.
Like, I was able to apply what I had learned and how I'd learned it into like every discipline sense.
Hmm.
So that was a godsend to me. It changed my life, and I'm very grateful for that experience. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have continued on with school, or continued on to university, where I was able to pursue broadcasting. That's a really important aspect too, like learning how to learn. How do you learn?
Right.
What resonates with you? Like, what's important to you? Because school, with tests and memorization and that, if that's not your thing, if it's baseball statistics, I'm all over it. Like,
Hmm.
I can go on for days on that. But like, who did what, when, in what year, and all that stuff, for like history or geography, like, forget it.
Right.
But you know, that's a huge, huge thing, and that allows you to become true to yourself.
How did you? So I can relate to school made me feel stupid. And this is
Yeah.
I'm going to do my own, this is my little bone to pick with the education system, the way it's set up right now is they have a certain type of learning. They have their own style. They have the topics that everyone needs to learn, and things are changing a little bit now, but they'll take a kid who's young. Let's say they're 9, 10, 11 years old. The kid maybe had a shitty breakfast, goes to school where he has pizza for lunch with a Go-Gurt full of sugar, and then finishes that off with a popsicle and wants to go climb trees. And they're sitting him down in the class and they're saying, he doesn't learn or she doesn't learn. She needs Adderall. They need this. They need to be in special education. But like you said, had you asked the kid to show me the cheat codes to some online video game, they could write everything down. They could study, they could tell you, create a map. They could do anything that pertained to what they wanted to learn. But I'm curious, how did you teach yourself to learn the way that the education system was providing, or a way that clicked with them? Because that was difficult for me to even transition to.
So in this model, and I can't say enough about it. Like it was not about tests. It was about participation in class, demonstrating what you're learning, what are you providing to the group? We would have group discussions about these books I was learning. And this is a remarkable thing. Like I was always a good writer, and I could read well and those sorts of things. But for my mom, like, to watch me go from just, whatever, just partying and, like I was not into anything, to reading Dostoevsky and Camus and Sartre and like getting deep into these, like really heavy things, because it was part of the curriculum of this class, because I knew once I ingested it, I could then, come up with an interpretation and present it to the class. Like, that was like mind altering to me. So I'm devouring these classic works, like heavy philosophy stuff, and really digging it. And then, to be able to present it in the way that I was interpreting it, and then getting feedback on that, for me, it is high level learning, and I get that. But like at that time, like I didn't know that. All I knew is that I was able to have a stage and a voice in this process. And then at the end of the semester, instead of having a test or a final or whatever, you would create some sort of a presentation to the class in terms of what it is you'd learned and how you'd interpret it. So I was writing plays. I mean, that was kind of my way of doing it. And I'd never written a play, but I wrote a few about, how I was going to interpret this information. And that actually started a whole new thing for me, where the drama chair for the college came in to sort of adjudicate what we were doing. And then she came to me afterwards and she said, "Have you ever acted before?" And I said, "I've never acted before." And she said, "Well, you should." And she said, we do that. And so then I went off on this other little side track, and I almost pursued that as a career, acting. And I came very, very close, but I ended up going to Washington State after I, got my 4 points and got my GPA up enough to get out of there. And then I went to Wazoo and did what it was I was originally intending to do in broadcasting, which was great. But I do often think, like, what would have happened had I gone down that acting road? Because I've seen a lot of people that I worked with at Bellevue, like Jim Caviezel. I was his first, people know who he is. Mm-hmm. I was his first acting scene partner. He was a fellow student at Bellevue College. And then a lot of my friends have gone on to be very successful in Hollywood. And so it happens. And I almost went down that road, but I didn't trust myself enough, honestly, because I was too much of a partier. I didn't trust myself to go to LA. And then, as my dad put it, like, what happens when you go and get that acting degree? You have a piece of paper that says you can act. And I thought about that a lot. And I knew that I would have to do a lot of jobs, and I would have to work really hard just to get that job. Mm-hmm. And I really thought about that hard. And then I pivoted back to broadcasting, and I can't say it was the right call. I don't know, but it was the call I made.
Was it the safe route or the safer route?
Safer route.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
the
what it
safer
was.
route. Yeah.
Safer route. I mean, I knew I would get paid doing what it is I wanted to do as opposed to doing some job that I didn't really like in order to make the means to do what I was going after. So there was some of that. And I think, the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing,
Hmm.
it's in my case, it's true. I mean, I can't even tell you how many hours I put in on television, like on live television, doing what I do. But I do that,
Hmm.
and that's the main focus of what I've done for 33 years is like, you know, that as opposed to waiting tables and trying to
Right.
figure that out. 'Cause I'm horrible at that.
Horrible
Horrible.
at waiting tables.
Horrible. I
Okay.
mean, I'm the worst, the worst restaurant service industry person ever.
Okay.
And I know that from, my high school experience.
From
So
your, well, you could have gotten better.
no, no, probably not.
Do you?
No, I could tell you stories. No, probably not.
What I have to ask? What was the nightmare high school waiting table story?
Oh
What
my God.
haunts you to not even
So
going
I
back
was
to it?
working at this hot shit French restaurant in downtown Kirkland, and the head chef Philippe was like I was a busboy,
Mhm.
but I couldn't even figure that out because there was just too much going on, too many tables, too many orders, and I had to do this and then I had to do that, and it was just like just a lot of like I have to be there and then I have to be there, and then like as a waiter you got to take this and oh and I want that and oh okay, like it was just too much for me.
Mhm.
I got back to the back and I'd screwed something up. Philippe took this hard roll and he just hucked it at me as hard as he could, and it just I mean, I had to duck to avoid it. And I was like, man, maybe the restaurant industry isn't for me. Um, yeah, not good.
Well, it looks like things worked out going the college route and going the news route. But it isn't too late to get back into it, and you can speak to this as not waiting tables. I'm not recommending that, but getting back into acting, and you can speak to this as much
Yeah.
as you want.
And actually, I plan to.
Okay, because I did see, as I told you, I did about 48 hours of deep investigation, and it looks
Cool.
like you do a little bit of voiceovers and a little bit of, is it improv or sketch
Yeah.
comedy, or am I right
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, I mean, that's my background. So once I went to Wazoo and then I was studying broadcasting, like they had this sketch comedy show there called Live at 8 that I did for the time I was there. And, it was wonderful. I mean, just a great experience. Like they give you control of the college channel and you can create whatever show you want and however you want to do it. And I got, connected with some like-minded weirdos who, were really creative and really funny. And a lot of those people have gone on to have really successful careers in Hollywood. And just super, and they're still great friends to this day. Like the core of that group, like you know, uh, I can't, that was just a great experience. Just the idea that we had complete control of what we were doing. We were going to create this. We're going to produce it, direct it all ourselves, and then throw it on television. And we won a bunch of awards. Got written up in Rolling Stone. Like we thought we were great. And so there was another one of those things where it's like, gosh, do I go that route? And so it was the second one of those, even though I was, majoring in broadcasting, I minored in drama, but at the same time, like I thought like, you know, what if? And
Hmm.
I contemplated it again and then decided to no, I want to do sports. So that's what I got into. The news thing just happened later, but yeah.
So this is just fun fact. who do you think is, I can't say they're the most famous. I was surprised when I found this out, but who would you think is the most famous actor to come out of Washington State University?
The most famous actor to come out of Washington State University.
This one surprised me.
Um, Maybe Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Okay, so you know that. Yeah.
That's funny. We were talking about that because when we were doing the show, we realized that Dolph Lundgren had come there and studied at Washington State as an exchange student.
Yeah, I was when I found that out. I was like, I think it was like a chemistry. He did something with chemistry or something like that. Or I'm not sure, but yeah, that one always. When I first heard it, it surprised me.
Drago
Yeah, yeah.
from Rocky Four.
So you come into Washington State, you enter the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication, which, side note, I went to Washington State to get into sports broadcasting and I failed.
Really?
First semester.
I didn't know this about you, Derek.
Yeah, so I went in and this is a little bit different than you, but I went there and I partied. I think I attended there's one class that I went to. It was a communication course, and this is when people will say, "Oh, do you have the dream of you're taking a test and you're naked, like that nightmare?" I had a class that I went to 3 times, and I played baseball in junior college, so I was devoted to it. It was everything. I used to sit in the front 2 rows of class in community college, and that was my life. So when I went to Washington State, I wanted to be a kid, and I just had a great time, but I didn't really attend class that much. And there was a final that I walked into 10 minutes late. This is like a nightmare story. And it's in one of the auditorium classes that's steep. Like it's like everyone's looking down
Yeah,
on you.
like Brian Hall.
Yes, yes. So 10 minutes late to the final, walk in. The only seat available is in the very front. There's probably, it's not the biggest, but there's probably like 90 kids in this class. And I walk in and I sit down, and the teacher doesn't like me anyway because she doesn't even really know me. So I walk up, show my ID to take the final, and I sit down. And it's a Scantron test that you have to take in number 2 pencil. And I realized I didn't have one. I walked up and I said, "Mrs. So-and-so, can I use a number 2 pencil for this final?" And she just looked at me and said, "Good luck, Mr. Baer." And I took it in pen. I was in and out of that class in like 8 minutes, like, see ya, when I walked out. And so
Oh no.
so I failed. But I hung around and waited tables and bartended at Denny's in Pullman. And then I don't think it was, I don't know what it would have been called when you were there, but I worked at a bar that it's changed names a lot, but it was called Shakers at one point. And it was
Yeah.
Shakers was famous. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress into my Washington State journey. But so you go there and you don't fail out of the communication school. And where does that land you after you graduate?
So I went to Boise, Idaho. I was interning at KIVI down there, and that was a great experience for me. I worked really hard. I was scared. I was so scared because I was on my own, like completely on my own, and had zero money, and I had to go in there every day and sort of earn it, And I was working in the sports department, but they would throw me out on, different stories, and I would, turn a package, as we call it, like a, little story for the news, and they were putting them on the air. So I was feeling this great sense of accomplishment, like I'm actually going on the air, doing this television stuff. And then the 2 sports guys were out for a weekend. Like one guy had to go get an award somewhere, the other guy was off or whatever. And the news director called me up and said, "We would like you to anchor the sportscast." Now I'm an unpaid intern, and I'm thinking like, wow, this is great. So I had made, good connections with the people in that newsroom there, and they were very supportive, mostly supportive. Some people couldn't believe they were doing that. But I went out there. There was this assignment editor, I remember, who used to always just call me intern. Like intern, hey intern, hey intern. And then I got out there, and I mean, needless to say, I was a little bit nervous. It was the first newscast I'd ever given on a broadcast station. But then I, got back in the newsroom, and the assignment editor was back there, and he goes, "Hey, intern." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Looks like you belong there."
Oh,
And I
that's cool.
thought,
That's
all
cool.
right. Those people really took me under their wing. And it was through those connections I made there that I was able to get my first actual full-time TV job up in Great Falls, Montana. So it was a good experience.
Well, that's a great experience. And trial by fire sucks, but it is a really good way to figure out if you belong there. And I think it's awesome
Yeah.
that he gave you that confidence right away. Because that,
Yeah.
had he not said anything, maybe you'd be in your head and wondering. So that's a huge, huge thing from, I don't know if you'd call
And
that a
build some
mentor, but
tape.
someone you look up to.
Yeah. Yeah. You put a tape together. That's how you get the next job. But it was really through the connections I made there that, the people that saw how hard I was working, that they were able to, put the word out to people that they knew in the business that, hey, this kid actually, is, has something,
Yeah, can do this.
and that something is almost always, yes, you got to have, some talent, but like, you just got to want it,
Hmm.
and you got to show you want it.
Hmm. And so when you moved from there, did you go to, I'm a little confused on this. Did you go to Green Bay to work for a local news station, or were you covering the Packers specifically?
Yeah, I was covering it's the Pack. I mean, in Green Bay, I mean that town bleeds
I
green and gold.
yeah.
So if anything would happen with the Packers, it would lead the newscast. So I mean, anything, whether the free agent signing or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's the lead story of the newscast in Green Bay. Um, I mean, as the sports director of the NBC affiliate there, I mean, it was like just a great job. I mean,
Hmm.
in a town that's absolutely football crazy. The best line I heard about Green Bay is that it's a drinking town with a football problem,
Yeah.
and
It
that's the truth.
absolutely. Yeah.
And this was the comeuppance of Green Bay, 96, 97, where Favre
Is
was
that?
on the ascendancy, Holmgren
Hmm.
was there, they were Reggie White, they were on the rise, and I was literally right in the middle of it every single day, every press conference, in the locker room, like partying at bars with the guys after the
Hmm.
games, it was an immersive experience in what a great football team's all about, and it was so cool. I can't even say enough. And before that, it was down in Arkansas covering the Razorbacks, and they were on national championship runs. So I got super lucky there after Great Falls, then Arkansas, and then Green Bay. That was just a great way to cut my teeth in the sports thing. So I was ready to come home. I got the chance to come home, and then I was ready for whatever.
And so actually, so with that, which one would you say was more exciting? Because college football is really exciting, but Green Bay does feel like a college town. And you got to
Yeah,
cover two Super Bowls, correct? With Green Bay.
yeah.
Which one, when you look back on, do you reflect on more fondly?
Uh, I mean, for different reasons, both of them. But like in Green Bay, it's just hard to quantify what that time was like
Hmm.
because they hadn't been good in so long, and it was finally, you know, ripening. It was right there, and so to watch that team that was just supremely talented, and to watch them every single day.
Hmm.
At that time, I mean, they had the best defense, led by Reggie White in terms of points allowed in football history. Uh, it was really something. And Favre was just a special athlete.
Hmm.
That like at that time, I mean that was the prime of his career. They should have won that second Super Bowl that they played against the Broncos, but they ran into Terrell Davis, and there was a little bit of hubris that went into that too. Like I think they thought that they were gonna walk over Denver that day. the one where Mike Shanahan goes, "This one's for John," Elway's first.
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah. Well, in the locker room afterwards, Shanahan held up the trophy and said, "This one's for John," because and then they would go on to win another one. But um, yeah, it was that was a really special time, special experience. Can't say enough about that. I mean, coming home to Seattle and to cover the teams that I grew up cheering for, like that was really great. And I mean, I can't say enough. Like the 2001 Mariner run, like incredible. The Seahawks run, and 2013. Like I mean, those are magical things. But I wasn't as um, just absolutely insular in that experience as I was there in Green Bay, because it's a special place, and that was a really special team.
Well, so when you left Green Bay, did you go to Great Falls and then back to Seattle? What was
So
the
it
path from
was
there?
it was great. So after my internship in Boise, it was Great Falls. That was my first job. Spent
Hmm.
3 years there, and then 2 years in Arkansas covering the Razorbacks. Got the job up in Green Bay, sort of moving up markets.
Hmm.
And then I had made a connection through an acting class at Bellevue College with Tony Ventrella, who had like kind of apropos of nothing, like just showed up at our acting class one day, a scene study class, because he was working on doing some community theater, which he still does to this day in this community. And he, wanted to, do some work, and it worked with his schedule. And so he showed up, and then I got to know him a little bit, worked with him a little bit there, and kind of picked his brain about how you do it in the sports broadcasting thing. And he explained, well, you go to school and you get a tape together, and then and so I did, and I would send him tapes of my work over the years, and he would always respond, and he was always very positive, as Tony always is. And he one day when I was in Green Bay, I was literally covering the Super Bowl, and they had flown me in at Cairo. Tony was at Cairo at that point, but he was my idol growing
Hmm.
up, like as a sportscaster. Like I stole phrases of his and stuff on the air for years. And uh, he said, "I think we have a job for you." And I came up and got the job in Seattle. I mean, that was I mean, in terms of visualization, like what you wanted, like a dream situation.
Hmm.
Like I visualized what that would be like. I envisioned myself. They talk about you do vision techniques and
Hmm.
that sort of thing, and I would envision myself in that spot, and I literally did exactly that, what I wanted. But it was Tony that did it. Like I mean, it was that connection that allowed that to happen, because I just fostered that over many years, and that's how I got it.
What would you do? And this is one of those moments that just is going to be powerful for any listener, regardless of what they're doing for work. I believe in visualization. I think it's so powerful. When you were doing this, what routine were you doing? Like, were you journaling and sitting there? Were you meditating? How were you envisioning this to make it come true?
That's a great question. I think it was visualization, not articulation. But I think visualization is huge, because I would sit there, I would close my eyes, and I would literally envision myself sitting on that seat, in that space, in that studio. I mean, it wasn't something I was super uncomfortable with, but like for years, from my very first job, I would think, like, how would I deal with the situation? Like I would think, Tom Flores was the head coach of the Seahawks. What if I was like, in that seat, and I was interviewing him there? What am I talking about? Who am I interacting with on the set? And it all literally came true. Like, and it happened. So I remember the day so clearly. It was, a huge thing when I got the call that I had gotten the job at Cairo. I was at work, and like to come home was, I mean, I had no idea I was ever going to be able to come back to Seattle. Like,
Mhm.
I could have ended up anywhere, in this, weird industry. Like I said, it's like a vagabond existence. You're like going off to whatever. And like, but I'd always had that as something that I really, would like to have happened. Um, and when I got that call, I I walked out the door and I walked out of the station and I went down a hill, across the street, down a hill, and I just screamed at the top of my lungs and I jumped around and I just screamed out loud. I fucking did it. Did it. And then I come back and I'm literally getting chills right now. I came back home and people will go, "Oh, that was your dream? That was your dream to like do weekend sports at Cairo?" Yeah, that was literally my dream. And maybe it's not much of a dream to some people, but it was literally my dream. And then I came back and I was sitting on the set the very first night, and Joyce Taylor was she was the co-anchor. Susan Hutchison was off that night, and then Rabel was in the other seat, and Harry Wappler was doing weather. These are people I
Mhm.
grew up watching, right? And I sit down, I introduce myself to Joyce, and I say, "Hey, how's it going?" And I said, "Hey, I'm from here," and like she goes, "Isn't that cool to be able to come home and do this?" Because she's the same thing, and I said, "Yeah, it's just incredible." And I said out loud, "I've been dreaming of sitting in this seat for years." And Rabel, without missing a beat, he goes, "That's funny because we just had those chairs brought in like last month."
That's awesome. That's
It's like,
hilarious.
it's cool. So like, I mean, that was, yeah. So that was the whole thing, and then I got to work with all those great people at Cairo, and then I did that for a couple of years, and then I got hired at Fox Sports to do Mariners and all that stuff. I was doing Detroit and Seattle all at the same time. It was a
Oh
long story.
wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah, it was crazy. It was a regional sports project, and they decided to have the Seattle hub do the Detroit sports as well. So I was literally doing I would do like a Pistons pregame, and then like a Mariners pregame, Pistons post, and then the Mariners post game. Like it was,
why
really
did they
weird.
want to do that? I've
I
never heard
think
of
the
that
time
before.
zones. I think the time zones were part of it, but it was a
Okay.
poorly kept secret in Detroit that their broadcast was coming out of Seattle.
Hmm.
So it was a tough one. I mean, Detroit being the hardcore sports town that it is, like, you know, coming out of a Red Wings game, I'd do the post game and then, go right into Mariners pre or whatever. I mean, but it also taught me a lot about how you do long form broadcasts without a script too. So that helped me a lot.
And is that just because you were on the spot when you were doing these interviews?
Well, so like for like a Red Wings pregame, there was a fair amount of scripted stuff. But for a post game, you're just going by the seat of your pants. A lot of times, you're taking statistics and trying to contextualize them, and then you'll toss to a post game interview or whatever, podium sound or whatever, like a coach,
Hmm.
talking at the podium after the game. Um, so yeah, I mean that helped me a ton, and especially moving into news,
Hmm.
which I ended up doing after 3 years at Fox.
Well, so that's a perfect segue because I was going to ask about that. So we talked a lot about sports, but from my research, that's you've covered some pretty incredible pieces, or you've had incredible stories that you've covered. I'm going to ask this in a two-part way. One is, how did you transition into that, going from sports to like the I believe it was the tsunami in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Was that it? How did you transition? And then this is the second part of the stories that you've covered, because there's a ton of them. what are one or two that stand out and that you're most proud of?
Yeah, so in '03, I my contract wasn't renewed at Fox, and it was a really tumultuous time there because the regional project wasn't working for them. Fox Sports Net is now Root Sports,
Hmm.
and it's a different setup as what we had then. Um, but so that they were moving out of the regional thing. It didn't work. It should have worked, but it didn't. Um, Partly because of how it was all set up, like I was describing to you, like having hubs in different towns and things. Like they needed to have it more. If you're doing regional sports, like keep it regional. It didn't work. I was laid off. I was out of a job. I it was hard. I had little kids and I had a mortgage to pay, and I honestly didn't know what to do. And I had never considered doing news really. Like it was so far out of my vernacular because sports is a completely different animal. So I through my very good friend Christine Chen, who I actually worked with in Montana, my very first job. She was the co-anchor of the morning news program at that time, and we had lunch one day, and I was just poking around, seeing if I could continue in television in some way. I honestly had no idea. I had looked around at sports jobs. I mean, there was nothing in the country that could pay me what I was making, and like I had to support a family, and you know, I considered I was up for a job in Tampa, and I was thinking like, gosh, do I want to move to Tampa? Like it was just like it was one of those times, and then um, I got a phone call from the news director at Channel 13, and he wanted to come in and talk to me, and I met with him, and I thought he was interviewing me for a news or for a sports job, and I had no idea. But we were just chatting, and I'm talking him up. So he gives me this job as a freelance reporter, and he throws me out on the street as a general assignment reporter, and I had literally no idea what I was doing, none whatsoever. And I went out my second day out on the street. There was a huge marina fire in Seattle, and these boats are bouncing off each other like, lanterns catching each other on fire. And I'm doing the best I can to cover this breaking news live on the scene. And I didn't know it at the time, but apparently CNN had picked up my live reporting, and I was reporting
Whoa.
there as well. And I came back to the station, and I go into the news director's office, and I say, "Hey, how did I do?" And he goes, "Well, it was okay." And he takes me in his office, and he explains, "Okay, this is how you do it. Okay, breaking news, it's this and that. You gotta set the scene up, and you don't pretend like it's a continuing thing. You have to set the scene each individual time. I mean, the very basics of breaking news." But I learned so much, and I did that for a couple of months, and then he let me anchor the morning news program two times. And then after the second day, he said, "Do you want that job?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll take that." And that's how I ended up there. And that was in 2003. So 20 years later, still getting up ridiculously early, banging it out.
And it was 2003? Was that when you covered the tsunami in South
Okay,
Asia?
so
Or was that
so
2005?
that was a situation where I was embedded with a local aid group
Hmm.
that was going in there right after the tsunami. It had just happened. It was, the most horrible thing you can imagine. So this was like weeks after the tsunami had happened. Um, and so I flew to Sri Lanka, and this aid group was working with another NGO on the ground there to get help to these people. And I mean, you talk about, you know, just absolute obliteration. I mean, people's families were washed away in this thing, and just it was a transformative thing. So I came back. I mean, I was going to do some reporting on it. I knew I was going to do, some story. I wasn't reporting live from there, but I knew I was going to put together something. But it ended up being a 30-minute special that I put together, and it was almost like a plea for help. What I ended up putting together, because I couldn't believe what it was, and they gave me the leeway to present it like that. They didn't have a problem with me saying these people are in dire need, and they need some help. The beauty of what we did is that we got help. I mean, we raised a lot of money through that particular special, and one guy, I think he donated like a couple $100,000 to this thing.
Wow.
And these fishermen who had lost everything, like we bought them boats, boats so they could go back out and go fishing again, and make a living.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it really was. And to see it turn around like that, like you make this, like, look at this horrible situation, and somebody would come through, and a lot of people did, but somebody would come through and say, I would like to do something about this, and actually do that, and to watch them get the stuff they need to go back to work and provide for their people. Like, it was that was really gratifying. It was powerful.
How did you, so you had that experience. How did you get involved with the earthquake in Haiti?
That was a phone call I got on an afternoon where I was up in Vancouver. I was doing some preview stuff for the Olympics there, and I had a friend's house up there, and I was looking at the TV, and the earthquake had just happened, and I was looking at those pictures going, oh my God, those people are going to be absolutely devastated. And especially, having dealt with, what I saw in Sri Lanka, like, I mean, I know how desperate those situations get. And then the next thing I know, I get a phone call and say, can you get back here? Because we want to, embed you again. We would send you to Sri Lanka or to Haiti tomorrow with the Air Force. And so I jumped on a C-130 with all these supplies. I mean, this is crazy. Those transport planes, like, they packed in all this heavy equipment, flew it out there, and we do this hard landing at the Port-au-Prince airport. I mean, within 2 days, I'm in the middle of it, and then off they go. Like, in 5 minutes, they're all off the plane and gone with all their stuff. Just heavy equipment, moving equipment, and what did I just say? Equipment, moving equipment,
Heavy equipment, moving equipment.
Heavy equipment. Like, just to move stuff as quickly as possible. To get stuff from one place to the other. Just to watch them work, to watch our military at work in this danger zone, and then what they packed back into this jet was refugees, people who needed to get out, like, desperately. So then I'm talking with these people on the way back. We were going to Charleston, South Carolina, without any idea how we're going to get back to Seattle, and that's a whole other story. But we flew out of there, and then we talked to all those people who had lost everything in the Port-au-Prince area. That was incredible. So yeah, I mean, you talk about like the absolute worst case scenario.
Absolute devastation. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to even imagine. And so, yeah, we did some good reporting there on that, and it was honestly, thanks to JBLM and the military for letting us embed with them and do that. I actually got to fly up when we were flying from. I think we had to go to Miami first and drop those people off, those refugees. they needed to get out because they had nothing. And then from there, the cargo jet was empty, and I got to fly up in the cockpit
Oh, wow.
to go to Charleston,
Wow. That's pretty
which
cool.
was yeah, yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's so this
And
is
then we were stuck, and then we had to figure out a way to get back to Seattle. But that's another story,
at least you're back in the US. And
right?
so is that the first Emmy Award you won?
Well, the first one was for sports, and then the second one was for my cancer story.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll transition. That's next on my list anyway. So we'll transition to that. So you were diagnosed, was it 2009? Was that
Yeah.
the year 2009 with, is it Hodgkin's lymphoma or non-Hodgkin's
Yeah.
lymphoma? Hodgkin's
Hodgkin.
lymphoma.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. And we talked about this briefly, but up until this point, and not to say that there weren't these trials and tribulations, but I'm assuming, and I hate to assume, this was a major holy shit moment.
Mhm.
What was you? What led you to go to the doctor, and then once you were diagnosed, how did it go from there?
Yeah. I had these lumps here on the side of my neck, and they weren't going away. And I was noticing because I was running a lot at that time, and I noticed that I was just a little, more tired than usual, and I just didn't feel right, and these lumps were weird, and I got a biopsy done, and it came back negative, but I wasn't buying it because it just didn't seem right, and then I
Mhm.
went and got some of these things ripped out of my neck, and and the doctor told me that it's probably lymphoma, but we're not sure. But we don't want you to go home and start Googling a bunch of stuff about lymphoma because because there's what 64 different kinds of lymphoma.
Mhm.
Um, and so, of course, I go home, and I mean, I'm a reporter. I'm
Right. I was going to say
I'm
you're like,
going to Google like everything I possibly can and really freak myself out. But I knew that like the kind I wanted, of all the possible options was Hodgkin's because it was very treatable and curable. So that's what I was kind of hoping for when you're left with those kinds of options. And so, and that's what it ended up being. And I remember when I got that diagnosis, it took a few days, and it was a pretty scary time because could have been a death sentence, or it could have been, something, treatable.
Mhm.
And it ended up being something more treatable. And I celebrated. I literally was like celebrating that I got this cancer. Like, as weird as that sounds, but I
it,
did.
it doesn't. It doesn't. It sounds very normal if you have 64 different types to deal with, and some are the immediate death sentence, and you're hoping for one. Then I can imagine that was still scary, but a major sense of relief.
Yeah, because you can get treated, take your medicine, as I put it,
Hmm.
and then you'll get through it. It sucked. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Lost my hair, and I had to deal with major fatigue and all that stuff. And I worked all through it and documented it. I don't know
Yeah.
why I decided to do that necessarily, but and had I gotten the same diagnosis today, I don't know if I would have gone that exact route that I did. Um,
Why not?
and I think maybe I'm sorry.
Why not?
I think maybe it was like some hubris. I knew that it was, as I call it, kind of a wimpy cancer, and I would have probably I had a 90% chance of beating it at that time. That isn't to say that it's not going to come back, and it does. So you're always kind of looking over your shoulder over that. But I think like documenting it and the way I did it was short-sighted and not altogether authentic because I wasn't. I think I was. Social media does this to us, where we feel like we need to present this version of ourselves. Like, I'm going to be this brave guy doing this. Now, there was some journalistic value to this, like take people inside a chemo treatment
Mm-hmm.
or inside of a radiation treatment, that people normally wouldn't want to look at, right? But so I did that under those, auspices. But I feel like in the end, like it personally, maybe it wasn't the best call on my end to be as open as I was, because like for many reasons. I mean I could talk about this for a while, but in the end, like I think I was opening myself up to what I call the wounded bird syndrome, where like people to this day will come up to me, how are you doing? Hey, how's your health? And I don't, I'm good,
Yeah.
and I don't know. So maybe so short-sighted maybe is the way I would put that. But then again, I was younger, and I don't, maybe I felt like I had something to prove or something.
Well, if I can lightly push back on that, and my opinion isn't worth anything, but you recognizing that now, well, you didn't know that then. It was in
Right.
that moment, it was that was a way to document what people are so scared of. And I would argue that whether or not it was a wimpy cancer is really fucking scary for anybody.
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
if you were to, there's probably, and I'm really guessing here, but to bring Bill's journey, and that's what it was called, right? Bill's Journey was the documentary. I would say that, well, you feel a certain type of way about making that, now looking back, there are so many families that maybe a dad, maybe someone's gone through the same diagnosis. And for that family to be able to watch you beat it, for the kid that has no idea, cancer is cancer. It doesn't matter if it's a wimpy one or stage 4, something else. I would argue that served as a layer of confidence that things are going to be okay, and maybe a way to lighten it up, seeing someone go through it, and also setting the expectations for this is what it's going to look like. This is what chemo is going to look like. I'm going to lose my hair. This is fatigue. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't, once again, my opinion doesn't matter, but I wouldn't beat yourself up about that. I know for a fact, without even seeing it, that it served somebody out there. And if it only
Yeah.
served one person, then you did your job.
Yeah, I think it definitely did that.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate you saying that, and I think that's valid.
Yeah, for sure. Cancer, it's just the word, the C word. It's just scary for
Yeah,
anybody. And it's hard to
it is.
understand. You said there's 64 types. What does that even mean? So seeing you go through it, that would absolutely be a guiding light for someone that's concerned or scared. And so when you beat it, this is
Are
another
they
thing.
coming after you, Derek?
What?
Are
Oh,
they coming after you?
I'm in Belltown. So yeah, you know how it is.
The
And
huge.
maybe they are coming after me. So after that happened, or maybe it was during that time, you were voted as Washington Man of the Year. Did you know
uh,
that?
Maybe.
You were voted as Western Washington. I don't remember what it was, but you were voted as Man of the Year in 2009.
Oh, for yeah. Oh,
Washington
that
Man of
was
the Year.
so that was a evening magazine. A competing station ran that thing, and somehow that's pretty weird.
Yeah. Well, it's out there. So getting to the point of cancer, and then pushing past that and being successful and continuing on as a successful anchor. I know in your personal life, I see that you travel a lot. And it looks like, because I did my deep investigation, I stalked your Instagram a little bit. You may ski a little bit as well.
Oh yeah. No,
And
I ski.
And you may have completed 8 marathons. Is that
10.
accurate?
Who's
10?
counting?
10? Yeah, who's counting? Obviously, I wasn't when I was doing my investigation. So what is your, so we've looked through you being a successful anchor. You've gotten 2 Emmy Awards. You've had documentaries. You're a father. What is it? Not what is it? What do you do? What are your personal interests? What are your personal hobbies that keep you going?
What keeps me going? Um, I just I just keep going. I don't know. Like professionally, I just keep showing up.
Hmm.
I got a few more years at this. I've been at it 33, and I have a few more. Um, and I enjoy the work. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. Um, I mean, it's to find something that you have a passion for, and so the traveling thing is, you know, I don't know if you're ever more alive than when you are on the road and traveling, exploring, learning, and I feel like my job is learning.
Hmm.
Professional learner is what I often say my job is, because like I'm constantly learning about stuff and people and places and things, and I love that. Like I'm just I'm a curious person, and so like to travel for me is like a constant learning experience, because you're in a place where the stimuli is different, and you have to find your way around. Like I don't know, so like when I go to a different place, I always just feel more alive. So I like that a lot. That's a big thing, but in the end it's about um, having something to be passionate about. That's what keeps you going.
What's what's your favorite travel destination?
Impossible. I have favorite places. I mean, places I've been, but like um, I don't know. Like I was in New York to visit my daughter a couple weeks ago. I mean, I love New York.
Hmm.
Like, and part of it is that we're from here, and Seattle's very different. But I don't know if there's, like London has some similarities, but it's not the same. Like I don't know if there's any place quite like New York. It's just so interesting to me. Like, and every neighborhood is different. Every borough like just has such a different character. I love New York, and that to me is a challenge. It's fascinating. Just finding my way around New York sometimes is fascinating, and that's intriguing to me. So yeah, I really I do love it. But I mean, this is home.
Hmm.
Seattle's home, and my daughter, even though like she was always fascinated with New York
Hmm.
and wanted to go to school there, or live there, or whatever, and she's doing it now. Like she's there, and she's like, God, I miss home. I really
Really?
I miss home. Part of it is the incredible humidity and heat in the summertime in New York, and
Right.
and she hasn't really dealt with a hardcore winter yet, but she's in for that. So
Right.
so there's that too.
Well, in New York, just I remember, I remember my first time there. I love going to New York, but it just there is a to give this is a weird depiction of the way that I feel. But if you think about Avatar, when they talk about, and this it's the furthest thing from New York is the movie Avatar, being in that jungle, but everything's flowing and everything's connected. I remember right when I got into Times Square for the first time, the energy, you could feel the electricity of everything around you. Everyone's moving so quick. Everyone's on their, it's like schools of fish, moving through the boroughs, moving through the subway system. And it has an electricity to it that I absolutely love. So I would agree for being in a U.S. destination. New York always, it never disappoints. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, and I'm going to try to deconstruct a few of the habits or rituals that have made you successful. What do this first 60 minutes of your morning look like?
The first 60 minutes of my morning are highly orchestrated. I wake up now at 4:14 a.m. And I say a word or two. Um, Inevitably, it just pops out of my mouth, and then brush my teeth. I shave if I haven't the night before, because I got to be out of the house quick because I don't have a lot of time. And then I hop in the shower, grab my bag, and I'm out the door because I mostly put everything together. And then I'm rushing into the studio because I'm in Redmond right now, 14 minutes to work. And then I'm copy editing for about half hour, 45 minutes, my scripts. And then I go get pretty, and then I'm on television at 5 or at 6. So sometimes at 5. And those days I'm up even earlier. And then the words are even more strong that come out of my mouth when the alarm goes off. Yeah. But so highly orchestrated, and then I'm on television, and I'm literally waking up on television. And I've been doing that for a really long time. And that's a really weird routine. That first 30 minutes on the air, I'm still like getting my faculties about me. Like I'll do a Wordle. I'll try to do a Wordle before I go on the air, just to like kind of kick it into gear a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do that spelling bee on the New York Times. I can't. I can never get genius on that, but I keep working at that.
Okay.
So, but that's kind of what my first hour is like.
That's the first hour. Are you doing? Do you have any exercise, or do you have any exercise routines?
Yeah. So like after work, I try to get a workout in, unless like some guy wants me to do a podcast or whatever, and then I don't get that in on time. But I do try to, like I'll try, like most days I want to do something active after I'm done with work. I want to go either run or lift weight. I lift weights most days after work because it's just a great decompressor. But now we're getting into the fall, and so I'm thinking about hockey. I've been playing a lot of golf, but a little more golf. And then go skiing. Like I can get out early enough. A lot of times I can go skiing. Skiing is the best release. I mean, it truly is the best.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
It's scientifically proven you cannot think about work and ski at the same time. Impossible.
I'll have to try that out, or I'll have to remember the next time I go. But I mean, just speaking from Seattle, it's where do you go typically, like weekday?
Well, if I can get out of there at a decent time, then I can go up to Alpental, and I can, get some, if there's fresh snow, like that's easy. That's 45 minutes away. But if it's going to be, a little higher elevation snow, I will bust down to Crystal and try to get some tracks there. But Alpental is kind of my go-to. Has been since I've been little, really. Like that is such a gem that we have.
It is. And Crystal's great. So I can connect with you on this as well, because I get up at the same time. Well, I don't get up at 4:14, which you said 14, right?
Yeah.
Why not 4:15?
I don't know.
Okay.
Because it's a minute before, and that gives me a minute to play with. I mean, literally, I have it down to the minute, and then I can pull into the parking lot, and then I'm there at like 4:56. I walk in the door, and then it's 5, and then I know that I have this amount of time to copy edit, and then I've got this amount of time to go get pretty, and then I got to get on the air. So it's like, highly orchestrated.
Mm-hmm. In leaving Seattle, so I know the routine is if you get out early enough. I typically do it on Wednesdays. That's just the day I do it. But you can be in 45 minutes. You can be up on the mountain, and you leave. At least for me, I'm in Belltown, so I leave the skyscrapers. I leave this mini concrete jungle, And as you start to get on I-90 East and you start to work through uh, Mercer Island, and then you're going to Issaquah, and it starts to get a little bit more, I'll call it rural. It's like any stress or anxiety that you had on the way up there just goes away, and then you're in the
Totally.
mountains, and you're like, "Wow, this is great." And this is a story for another time. But I used to spend more time in Costa Rica. In this last week or this last year, I was here for the whole winter, and getting out of the city and getting up to the mountains took away that
Yep.
gray feeling, the bogged down gray, because I'm up on the
And you can
mountain.
get up above it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
100%.
changed my
Sometimes,
winter.
sometimes the sun will pop out up there, but it's not down here. And
Hmm.
so it changes your perspective. And like, a lot of people say, well, I got to get out of here and go see sunshine in the winter. And I totally get that. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I want to do that. But you can do that just by getting up above it sometimes. And it changes everything. I feel like once I get up to the brown signs up there,
Hmm. Yeah.
around,
Like West
Castle,
Summit or
Chris,
whatever.
and yeah, if I get up to the brown signs, like I just feel better. Like it just feels better up there.
And it's quick. Like it's
Yeah,
quick once you see it.
easy peasy. And then I mean, anytime I'm in the mountains, I feel great. But there's just something about it. Maybe it's just about the altitude or whatever, but like it just changes everything.
It does, and maybe it's the cold. It's the crisp, and you wake up even more being
I like
in
it.
that
Plus
climate.
making turns in fresh snow. I mean,
Yeah, and your legs are flexing. It's a great workout. What would you say for? Is there anyone that you look at as a mentor that you'd want to thank, or someone that you looked up to and guided your career path, or was a force that maybe you couldn't have done what you've done without them?
Tony Ventrella.
Tony Ventrella.
Tony Ventrella so he started in Seattle in '81 at Como, and then he went over to King, and he was the sports guy there, and then went to Cairo and was the main sports guy there, and then he hired me there. And then after I had left it, he went to Channel 13, and I ended up actually taking over for him on the morning show at Channel 13, which is kind of a weird deal. But then Tony went on and spent 12 years working for the Seahawks after that, doing a lot of their stuff. That he was my idol, the guy I looked up to in the business, and just just totally random happenstance was in an acting class with me at Bellevue College, and was able to keep that connection going. And he was a great champion of mine, and just a great dude. Like, I probably wouldn't have gotten to Seattle when I did, how I did, without him. So I'll be forever grateful to that guy.
What was the most impactful lesson that you learned from him, or something you gained from him?
Don't take it all so seriously. I mean, I think that was a big thing. Um, yeah, the younger me was really hyper focused on just getting ahead, and like wanting to make my mark and all that stuff. And um, I yeah I, I took it all way too seriously for a long time. um, and I think some of that just comes with age. Like when you're younger, you want stuff so much more, you want it now. I think particularly in this generation, everything's got to come quick, and we got to have it the way we want it. We want it now. Um, but in the end, like, just if you don't take yourself so seriously and don't take your work so seriously, you'll probably be better off.
Thank you. That I'm dealing with that a lot right now. So that's big
Yeah.
for me. Thank you.
Yeah. What's going on?
I just am taking myself too seriously, and
Yeah.
not. I feel like I'm missing out on some of the kind of family's important. Like that's the most important thing. And I feel like I lately I'm not creating enough time because I'm so focused on making what I want to make happen, and I'm taking myself too seriously. And it's like, if I were to put if I were to put 1,000 pounds of force to something that can only move at 5 miles an hour, or I could put 200 pounds of force and it's still only going to move at 5 miles per hour, I'm caught up in giving it the 1,000 pounds, trying to speed it up, and it just has to take its own time. But that really speaks to me because
But I
I'm
think if
caught
you
up.
do, yeah, man. I mean, like, just yeah. I mean, the force you're putting into it
Mhm.
isn't going to make it move any faster,
Right.
right? It's the idea that you're putting the force behind it, right?
Mhm.
It's not going to move in the way that you want it to necessarily in
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. And I keep reminding myself this, but when you get to where you want to go, you look back and realize that the journey was the fun part. And when you get there, it's like, well, I'm happy I'm here, but I'm trying to skip through the process, and I need to enjoy the
Right.
process.
Yeah. That's it, man. That's the key to everything.
Hmm.
You nailed it.
Well, thank you. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that to happen. So, yeah, thanks for bearing with me. And that kind of leads me into another question that obviously is going to serve me. But if you were to speak to your 18-year-old self, your 28-year-old self, your 38-year-old self, and your 48-year-old self, so each decade that you go, looking back and knowing what you know, what advice would you give them?
That's an interesting one because those are the years of your graduation, and then like your 10-year reunion, your 20 and 30, right?
Hmm.
Um, ish, right?
Hmm.
So like I think to my 18-year-old self, I would be like, don't sell yourself short. Like because I felt like we talked about earlier, I felt beaten down by school and all that stuff, and I wasn't I wasn't confident enough to even like I had to learn it. I had to learn how to learn in order to be confident in what I could actually do.
Hmm.
So don't sell yourself short. And then honestly, at 28, it would be you ain't all that. So you flip it around, but it's the truth. Like, man, I really felt like I was hot shit at 28, and I wasn't yet, and I really wanted to make. It's just like you were talking about. I was trying to push all this stuff, like I just get out of my way. I'm going to these places. Um, and then I feel like at 38, you're sort of in where maybe you had an idea that you were going to end up way up there.
Hmm.
And then the reality has sort of set in, like where the parameters actually are. And maybe you are going to still get that moonshot, but it just
Hmm.
hasn't quite, materialized. But generally, I think you're getting a sense of where you are, right? And then by 48, it's fairly settled, right? And you got to just figure out how to be happy with that,
Hmm.
like this is kind of what it is, and I did the best I could, and to be okay with that.
Hmm.
um, but what I tell my kids a lot, and I with my daughter, like I'm so proud of this kid. Like um, I've said it so many times to them, and it's part of what we were just talking about. Enjoy the process, but it's really about find your passion, like you know, and find your passion. Um, and if you enjoy the work, because like we spend so much of our life working,
Hmm.
right? And I don't know what the statistics show, but I would guess 70% maybe even more of us, work and we hate it. We hate what we do. We do it because we have to do it and we have to pay a bill and whatever. But if you can find that passion and you can go to work doing that, it's always, and at a point it's going to be work. Like I've talked with rock stars and I've talked with, very famous actors, and they will tell me the same thing. Like at a point it's work. You got to go to work.
Yeah.
But what is the work? And do you enjoy that work? Like if you enjoy that work, I think you won, honestly. So if you find your passion and you work at that, it's not as much work as somebody that's going to work, doing something they hate every day. Because we do way too much of that.
Right.
I think. I don't know. I articulated that poorly, but there's a good message in there.
No, I agree. And anything you're passionate about, eventually, like you said, an actor. I would have cut off my left leg to be an actor when I was young. But the actor, once you get through the thrills of it, it's a job. And
total work. I mean, it's a tremendous. I mean, acting is a tremendous amount of work. Like people think, oh, you're just going up on stage and you're pretending to be somebody else. No, you're not. No. You would not believe the research and work that goes into that. And it's not work like, you're going over a spreadsheet. It's like emotional. It's hard. It's hard to become somebody else. And so like don't kid yourself. And the rock star that goes out there and he's got to perform every night, yeah, he's got to do that again tomorrow and the next day, and then he's got 2 days after that, and he's 1,000 miles away, and he's away from. It's work, right? I mean, it doesn't matter how fun that is; it's still work, and you got to go do the work, and we all do. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. So, but if you find the passion, the work becomes tolerable.
Yeah, and for that, like for that rock star, for that actor, or any performer, that is, you also have the pressures of delivery. So every night, every city, you need to give the best show you've ever given. And if one person there didn't like it, now they have this tool and they can say, they can say, which I'll transition into this. Last night saw Dead and Co. They sucked, and it's like, what? That was great. One person didn't love it. And that brings me to, how did you, and I promise we're wrapping up here, but how did you get so involved with the Grateful Dead?
Oh, the Grateful Dead. Well, I stumbled into it. So I was hanging out with a bunch of degenerates in the 1980s, when I was kind of in the middle of that. I'd flunked out of college and I came back home, and I knew of the Grateful Dead, but I didn't know anything about them. And then some guys that I got to know actually at Houghton Beach in Kirkland. They were Bellevue High School guys. I was a Lake Washington High School guy, and we called it Unemployment Beach, and there we were. And these guys, they were fun to hang out with and stuff, but they were all into the Grateful Dead, and I didn't know anything about them. But they took me to my first Dead show in 1987. And I didn't get it. I didn't get it then. And then I went to another one in 88. And I was it was just the vibe of the thing. Mm-hmm. And then I started listening to some of their recorded stuff, not their live stuff. And it was American Beauty that really turned me on to them. And that album, and then In the Dark, the 87 album that they released, The Touch of Grey. Well, they used to call us touch heads. So that was like the one hit that they ever had. But it was from there that I really started to understand like what it was about. It's about community, it was about, that's what it was always about from 65 on, like, just the community and the vibe at the concert. Mm-hmm. And what I found, really cool with the Dead and Company thing with John Mayer, John Mayer's good pop music. Don't want to disparage the guy, but once he joined the, Bobby and was doing the Dead and Company thing, I was like, well, I'll never go watch another Dead shit. Not with that guy. But then I watched a YouTube video of them playing, and this was early, like 2017 or something, and I was like, wow, like, Jerry would approve of this. Like, this is cool. And then I got back on the wagon, and I'm like, now I'm traveling to shows again to go see these guys, and it was so great. But the best part is that this is what they were always about. It was about, like, the music will live on. A lot of their music is, 100 years old. A lot of it they wrote and produced themselves, but like a lot of it are just old folk tunes that they repurposed and just,
Oh, I didn't know that.
kept it going on. So now,
Oh,
and
that's
here we
cool.
are, now we're 5 generations in, and you got, these kids coming in, digging on it. And I saw this shirt of this kid at the Gord show, and it said, John is my Jerry. And
Oh,
I
that's cool. That's
that's
cool.
that's what it's all about,
That is cool.
like just paying it forward, just
Yeah.
just keeping it going, and that to me is what the Grateful Dead's all about. But
I love that. I was always curious what the background was and how you got involved in that because you'd consider yourself a deadhead, right?
I am a Deadhead, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. In my last quick rapid fire questions, and take as long as you want on them, but this might be a difficult one. But what's your greatest success to date?
What greatest success to date? I think raising two reasonably functional kids. I'm super proud of my kids.
That's a good answer. I had a feeling you were going to go that way. Okay, so
Yeah, I
being a
am.
father.
I'm over the moon. I'm actually heading to Spokane to go hang out with my son. We're going to the Coug game this weekend.
Oh, well,
Yeah, yeah. I miss
enjoy
those
it.
guys.
Enjoy your time out there. It's been a long
Pac
time.
2 championship.
Is that what it's now? Is it Pac 2
Well,
now?
no, it's
Oh,
Oregon.
okay.
It's
I was going
Oregon
to say,
State and Washington State, the last two
yeah,
in the Pac-12. So my friends are making these T-shirts say Pac 2
Pac 2.
championship.
Oh, that's awesome. And what would be, so you said you read a lot. What is your most gifted book? A book that you recommend that people read most often?
So the book I've gifted the most is Isaac Storm. It's by Eric Larson, local author who writes. It's historical nonfiction, but it's written in a way that tells a really compelling story based off of documents and memoirs and stuff. Um, I don't really read nonfiction, or I don't really read fiction. I only
Neither do
read
I.
nonfiction, and I don't know why that is. I really don't. I love plays, I love films, and I don't know what that is about me, but I don't really get into fiction books anymore.
Mhm.
So these nonfiction books really speak to me. I like the journalistic process these authors go through, and Larson is a master.
I will. I'll check that out. And I don't read fiction
It's
books
about
either.
the 1900 Galveston hurricane,
Okay.
and the guy who was the head of the National Meteorological uh, Society out of Galveston at that time, and how he miscalled that storm and killed a lot of people. It's horrible,
I
but a
will.
great book.
I will for sure read it, and I'll let you know my thoughts. And my last question is: what is a belief, if there's any, that you used to strongly hold on to, but you've changed your mind about?
Um, well, I think I don't know if it's like a cohesive thought, but like before I had cancer,
Hmm.
I was a hypochondriac, and then when I got cancer, I became somewhat of a nihilist. And so I don't give as much of a shit anymore. It loosened me up a lot, and I think that there's definitely some downside to that, but I think there's some real upside to that too. Like
I
I
think
was
there's
like,
more upside.
yeah, maybe I definitely I I take things a lot less seriously
Hmm.
than I did, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I used to, like we were talking about earlier, I used to take myself way too seriously,
Hmm.
and I stopped doing that. I've also stopped doing so much social media, which I think maybe is part or parcel of that, and
Hmm.
I don't know, but like I used to get really hung up on social media and how I presented myself on social media, and I just basically stopped doing it, and I find that somehow I'm a little bit happier. I don't know if social media is serving us in this world anymore.
Um, I I could go on and on about this. I think that there are pros and cons. I think the cons outweigh the pros, but it's all relative to the situation. I think that if someone's extremely lonely and maybe they're isolated somewhere, social media could be the thing that keeps them going. Where it would be better if they were to get into a community, but not everybody has that access. And
Right.
sometimes I think about people that are away at the military, and I can't imagine what that would have been like in the '60s versus now, and still being connected. And maybe it's not a good thing, but as a whole, social media is bullshit. It's not good for you. You're comparing yourself constantly. You're getting high. This is science. You're getting high on likes. It's like pulling a slot machine. And
Yep.
then if you put something up and you don't get the same amount of likes as the last time, you look inward. What did I do wrong? Should I take this post down?
Right.
So yeah, I think that social media is
And
when
then the
used.
feedback that you get, like people, the engagement or
Yeah,
whatever. I mean, oh,
yeah,
yeah, it's a slippery slope, man. Like we
it
used to
is.
literally get grades on that stuff in my business, and I
Really.
slowly backed out of it. And I've and now they, are there's a push to get engaged in some way, and I'm kind of struggling with it, to be honest with you. But maybe it's because I'm
Yeah.
an old guy now, and I don't feel like I really I don't know if it's the ends justify the means. I don't know.
If it makes you feel any better, I don't think you're an old guy. I'm 36. I don't think it's good either. And I'm trying to engage in it less and less. So, for what that's worth. And that's it for today. So, thank you. We made it through. I am so appreciative. I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to do this with me. It means more to me than you know. And I can for sure say, without a doubt, my this podcast moving forward will be this much better because the amount of detail I had to put into making sure that I knew what I was talking about with you. So thank you for being such an amazing person. Thank you for having so much out there that people can look up to. You're a huge figure in the Pacific Northwest, definitely the Seattle area. You volunteer with great organizations. Everybody in sports knows you. So this is a huge moment for me. It's a milestone for me, and I am just very grateful. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Derek. You're the man. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you. And until the next time, if anyone, oh, and I never say this, if anyone has questions for me or for Bill, you can find me at info@constructingsuccess.fm. And as we were just talking shit about social media, if you want to find Bill, it's Bill, Bill, Wixey, Wixey. And he's very easy to find on LinkedIn. Very easy to find because I found him immediately. LinkedIn, Instagram. I don't have Facebook, but you can get in touch with him through me, or you can get in touch with him directly. So, Bill, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. Cheers, man.
Thank you.